Okay, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Kennedy.
Here.
Alderman Conway. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Howard.
Present.
Alderwoman Murphy.
Here.
Alderman Ogilvy.
Here.
Alderwoman Navarro. Chairman Vaccaro. Alderman Conway. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Navarro. 5 present. Yes, carried.
So I'd like to make a motion that we put Board Bill 99 in front of us.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Alderman Kennedy. Alderman Conway. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Howard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Murphy. Alderman Ogilvy.
Aye.
Alderwoman Navarro. Chairman Vaccaro.
Aye.
Alderman Conway. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Navarro. 5 yes votes.
So we're gonna start with Board Bill 99. We can have Lewis or Larry take the hot seat on it. If you gotta go back over, we can have Larry.
Yeah, I'll get it started, but I think the people are still out in the hallway, some of them are still in the hall. They wanna come, you wanna have them come.
Yeah.
Let's wait, we have a bunch of people coming to
That's fine, we
speak
got
on
a
this
sign-up
bill
sheet.
today.
Yeah,
So-
the sign-up sheet's down there.
I'd like to wait until they get in.
This is Board Bill 99, this is,
There's an amendment to it. We have to deal with that first.
We have an extra minute.
this is 168.
Mr.
So I'm just, we wanna put the amendment in front of us?
Yes, we can move for the amendment right now.
So I'd like motion that we put the amendment to Board Bill 99 in front of us.
Let me have
So
that.
moved.
Second.
Previous roll. There no objection to previous roll. The amendment's in front of us, Board Bill 99.
Yes. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, amendment number 1 for Board Bill 99 just cleans up some language within the bill so that we're in compliance with TSA. So what it does, it goes down to page 3, line 4, after the word screening, insert the words and the words to say as close as possible to the checkpoint area as allowed by TSA. So we need to have that language within the bill just to be in compliance with TSA. So that's what amendment number 1 is. And I really would appreciate everybody's support on amendment number 1.
So then we will make a motion to accept amendment 99.
So moved, that we accept the amendment.
Previous roll.
Second.
No objection, previous roll. The amendment's now in the bill, and we can discuss the bill as amended. Do we have some speakers that want to talk on this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and for everyone else that's here watching the meeting today, we have competing meetings. We have a big meeting over in HUD's, and we're trying to go between both meetings today. But I really appreciate everybody showing up to talk about this very important bill. Mr. Chairman, there's another item that we will have to define within the bill, so I'm not asking that the bill be voted out today. I think we need another week to get one more item pinned down in the bill. And what that item is who will physically collect and deposit the money. Because according to TSA, anyone that's on the payroll of the airport, they cannot physically collect and deposit the money. So we can choose to have one of the nonprofits that have been working with us on the bill handle that piece. We can choose to have anybody we determine or any organization we determine be that entity to collect and deposit the funds and keep track of the funds. So we need one more week to get that piece worked out. But I would like to have all the testimony today, especially from a lot of the folks who have come here to testify to.
So, and we'll do how we want to do it. You don't want to just pass it out and do a floor substitute?
We could do that. We could do that and have a floor, bring a floor
We'll do a
substitute.
floor sub- I'm just saying.
Yeah, that'll save everybody
It'll also
another
Another
committee.
meeting.
keep
Yeah.
the thing
So
going
do
because we can
people,
have
you want to have
a
your
second read on
in?
Friday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute, no, this is the
For
right one.
Board Bill 99, I think, I know Ben, I know who all will be testifying today if you,
So, my only thought was then Friday we have a second read, and then when it's perfected, we can do a floor substitute.
Perfect.
Which will keep it moving along.
that's a great idea, and I appreciate that.
We'll most likely pass that out today. I think.
Okay, I think that's a good
Because I
idea.
think we have the
Yeah.
votes and that, and so we might as well just
Keep it-
keep moving forward. So,
I
do
think,
we have a sign-up sheet?
yes, Ben, I think,
They're signing up.
Okay, Sergeant Harper, or no, Major
Yeah.
Harper.
yeah. I guess I shouldn't call him Ben, sorry.
Tired,
Major.
Harper.
Yeah, that's even better.
Hey, Major, would you like to have a seat?
That's
Come on.
even better. Major, wow.
Yeah, I've been promoted here.
Not sure, Major.
Good morning, everyone. What is it?
Major, weren't you?
No, you wouldn't promote me, Joe.
Oh,
So I, hi, good morning, everybody. I'm John Harper. I'm, actually, what we're referring to, I'm a retired St. Louis Police Lieutenant. I was 39 years, and Mr. Lewis said, that's long enough, get out. And so I retired a few years ago, and had a great career. My father was a police officer, and all four of my brothers were involved in police work at one time here in St. Louis. So today, I'm also the, for 12 years, I served as the commander of the sex crimes, child abuse, and domestic violence units. Lieutenant Alana Huck is here with us that has that role today. But I appreciate it. I learned more in that role than I did in my 20 years of street work, and learned about victims. And I got to meet some great organizations. Some of those people are here with us today. You'll hear from them just real quick. But the Family Violence Council, the pamphlet that you have is the St. Louis Family Violence Council. It's 30 agencies and individuals all working together in a collaboration to help victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking. Some of our organizations are have been around a long, long time. Naturally, funding is a main component of the success of organizations. Some of the things that you hear from a couple of them right here. We've been talking about this bill since you brought it to our attention at our monthly meetings. Several of our board members are here from the St. Louis Family Violence Council, and I think you'd like to hear from them on where we think the helpful funding would work. We did have some questions that we were hoping we could talk about too, or at some point get some clarification on one you just mentioned. Who would pick the money up? Who's going to divide the money out? How's it going to go? And
Well, I would think to keep, and we can hold this, but I think by passing it out, doing a
move it.
floor substitute, because the mix has changed in these meetings, and then you guys actually physically have to keep coming back because different members are stuck in different meetings.
sure.
I would say, I would work with Mary in Lewis's office and with Lewis. And by the time we do a floor substitute, and not this Friday, it would be perfected the Friday after. That would give us 2 weeks or, well, a week and a half to figure it out, because that's important, where it goes, how it goes.
Sure.
So,
Do you have any questions about the Family Violence Council or before you hear?
No, go ahead, you talk about the family violence.
Well, Family Violence Council's been around a long time. Right, Mary?
93.
Since 1993. A couple of the ladies here, although they look very young, they've been in the mission of helping victims for even longer than that. So thank you so much for being here with us today. Probably the main component of Family Violence Council is the collaboration of agencies. It's not one agency, it's a collaboration of all the agencies. So what we're looking at is trying to identify problems in the system. Community coordinated response, that's all of us working together to address domestic violence and sexual assault. We focus our attention on St. Louis City, on those incidents happening in St. Louis City, although our organizations span around our metropolitan area. So, but when we talk about numbers are silly because numbers can be cyclical. Today we're up, tomorrow we're down. I think Elena's going to talk about last year, St. Louis Police had 18,000 911 calls for domestic violence. 18,000. That's a lot. That's a lot of two officer assignments, right, Chris? That's a 2 officers sent to that. Chris Annis is here from the DART unit, and that's a lot of work. And what about 2,500 reports are made out of that? 2,500 mostly felony reports, assault and domestic cases. But what we're also looking at is the cases that don't go to the police that these people are handling. You know, there's that large percentage of cases that don't get reported to 911. So there's still domestic violence, there's still issues out there that aren't going through the criminal process. So funding is just unbelievably, naturally for everything, but I mean for this too, for this work too. So the additional funding that we could garner, that we could get, will help us to better train people to respond to victims, maybe provide more access. You'll hear more access to emergency placement, emergency housing, which is I was just reading St. Martha's Hall had that's a shelter, had 1,900 referrals. 1,400 referrals. They didn't have anybody to an emergency placement process. So nights of safety, I think Maggie will talk about nights of safety is very important. So
All right,
anyway,
thanks.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Antonio Strong from the airport, why don't you come on up for a minute there? That's your number 1 on the list. And you're on the pro side of this, and according to the sheet here.
Yeah, we're,
And I would ask that you work with, you know, the president of the board and Mary to
And,
fix it.
and the Family Violence Council, so all of us
Well,
work together to.
Well, I meant to try and figure out who's gonna play, yeah, and
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
with Lieutenant Harper, but I thought you were promoted.
You can change that if you want. You can change that for my pension.
You would have been a lieutenant colonel or chief if I was there, but.
so, Antonio Strong, Airport Deputy Director of Finance Administration. And the program sounds like an excellent program, but as you talk about airport premises, there is a little bit of clarity that we would like to see in the board bill. And one of the things that we want to understand in the board bill, it mentions that the installation will be done by the airport, but we want to provide, we want a little bit of clarity regarding the cost of the boxes will not be burdened by the airport. You know, as Grant Assurance 25 of the FAA, revenues cannot be used unless they're only used for airport operating costs. So we just want to make sure that if these boxes are being put in the airport, that the costs are clarified, who's going to install and who's going to purchase the boxes. Okay. We currently do not have this in our 18 budget.
My understanding, and just because when I was talking to Mary, Colorado has them right there as you leave the airport. And do you know how they're doing it there? Obviously, there's a way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a way to do it. I don't know what the Denver program is like, but
And we've been in touch with Denver, and Mary will have all of that information when we get together to put together the floor substitute.
yeah. And I just heard your amendment regarding the placement of the boxes. One of the concerns that we had was that with it being within the or near TSA leasehold, there may be some security concerns, specifically when you talk about pre-security. So that would have to be consulted with TSA to confirm, you know, there are no security concerns before we actually place the boxes. And then we want to make sure that the dimensions and placement of boxes does not interfere with passenger flow. You know, you really can't put it like kind of in the middle of the floor, but we don't want it to kind of sit off to the side where nobody sees the boxes. So that would have to be kind of discussed and and taken care of.
And before you move forward, for the placement of the box and the box design, box size and everything, we're gonna keep it simple. We're gonna use the same thing that's being used at Denver and other airports. And the placement, we're gonna use the same placement at Denver, that Denver and other airports have used for the box.
And then, when we do
Yeah,
the floor
so
subs,
we'll
it's gonna
make
be
it-
all cleared up.
Yeah, we'll make it simple.
Okay. And then we do have some internal control concerns, like how will you control access to the boxes? If you have one person that has a key access to the boxes, and that one person is responsible for transferring the funds to the city, that is an internal control risk that you're taking. So we just want to make sure that that is kind of addressed. It's more of an operational issue, but you know, it's something that needs to be considered. And then also with the airport only being able to use revenues from the airport for airport operating costs, we would recommend a separate bank account is established for deposit of funds, and the funds should not commingle with airport funds. And we'd like to see more clarification on the responsibility for who will be responsible for reconciling the bank account that we're recommending, and who would be responsible for the disbursement of the funds. And lastly, the board bill kind of indicates there is an indefinite time period for this board bill. Normally with our kind of leases or contracts, we do have a time period on our contracts, like maybe 2 years, and then we have a renewal period. We would recommend that it is maybe a period that we put on there, and then it can be renewed, at least maybe 2 years.
2 years takes the Board of Aldermen out of it.
Yeah,
Anything
once,
under 3 years, does not come back to us.
yeah.
So I would like to see it be
Yeah.
at least 4 or 5,
Okay.
because otherwise it
But it-
never ever comes back here.
But we wouldn't have to come back and pass a whole new ordinance that, you know, to pass, because by passing the ordinance, we're setting it into law, right? Opposed to a contractual agreement, since we're the city and you're the city also. But taking into some of the nuances dealing with TSA, we're gonna do that within the bill. To have us have to come back and pass a new ordinance every 2 years is something that I'm not willing to do. I think that no other city has done that, and this isn't a contract between the airport and an outside entity. This is the city, and the city attempting to do something good for people that have experienced domestic violence, because that takes a toll on the crime in our city, and it's tearing families apart. And if this can help, and I believe it can help, I want to get it done, and not be so onerous that we overburden the program more than you see in any city in America. So I would not be in support of having to come back every 2 years like a private entity would have to in working with the city.
Well, I guess the time period probably will come on board whenever you issue the RFP, because you're issuing RFPs so that,
Yes.
yeah, so that the funds will go to a program, but I guess that RFP would actually have a time period on it, like it's going to go to this certain program for 3 years, and then you would issue another RFP after that, maybe?
Yes, but I don't think the ultimate distribution of the funds, where the funds go, impact the airport. That's not where it could be. It's just the fact that we have a unit there collecting funds, collecting spare change, right? So the fact that we have the unit there just collecting spare change, that's the piece that this ordinance speaks to, mainly that impacts the airport. Not so much so what entity ultimately receives the funds, right? I think that with the way we're working with the Family Violence Council, I think that they're going to play a major role moving forward in this, right? And you will see that within the floor substitute itself. But it's also going to be dependent on what the committee members would like to see within the floor substitute, because they're the ones that will essentially handle the bill on the floor of the Board of Aldermen when it comes on the floor of the Board of Aldermen. So it's going to be what they would like to see in it.
Okay. I'm sorry, there was one more thing that I want to mention is that with the boxes being potentially in the area that we may have to do construction in the future, we would like to probably see some language in there that says something like the director of airports in the best interest of the city or the airport or traveling public can temporarily suspend the change collection program or remove change collection programs as necessary due to construction, security issues, or other emergencies.
Yes, I think that's,
Okay.
yeah, I'd be okay with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So let's see, I believe you're next. Elena?
Elena.
Elena?
How you doing?
I think Lieutenant Harper kind of said,
Okay, can you?
so if you can, certainly, Lieutenant kind of said it was explained, so if you just have something you want to add to that, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. I'm Lieutenant Elena Hawk, Commander of Sex Crimes Family Violence Division. So here's what I have discovered since becoming the commander, is that there is a need among agencies that help victims of domestic violence. We can look at numbers all day, and in fact, I have the numbers in front of me. This year alone, up to, as of November 1st, there's been 14,887 calls for domestic violence. It's over 14,000 people asking for help. The number of homicides involving intimate partners this year is 5. That's up from 2 last year. I'd like to step back and take away and not look at the numbers. The cases we see each day are people that don't know what to do, don't know what resources are available to them. When we have victims of domestic violence, I like to look at the whole picture. The majority of these homes have children in them. We have children that are growing up in homes of domestic violence, and it's all they know. So they go out on the street. It's all they know. It's a vicious cycle. There are several states that DFS will step in if both parents are involved in domestic violence. The mom is aware and is making no efforts to leave, and will actually take the children. No way advocating for that, but it does show that other states recognize that when children grow up in a home filled with domestic violence, it has an adverse effect on them. The part that I would add to this is that the Family Violence Council is comprised of wonderful agencies that have been around for years helping victims. I would just ask that the money go to agencies that are already established and have already been there helping, have been here all along the way helping. I'd like to get to a point where we don't look at children and have to say, who failed you? I think that we as a society should step in and help. So it's not just helping the victims of domestic violence, but helping the children also. And I will just tell you we had a victim one day, she didn't want to leave her husband because she had her dog and she was afraid that her husband would kill the dog. Not knowing the Family Violence Council works with, there's agencies, the Humane Society, APA, they will take your pet for you if you're the victim of domestic violence. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of it, but that's the mindset of some victims. What if I leave? Where do I go with the children? There's an absolute need for housing for victims of domestic violence, safe places for them to go, and it's incredibly lacking. I would just like any funding, and in fact, anything that brings open a discussion of the epidemic of violence that we have in the city, I think is a worthwhile cause. There is just working out who gets the money and who collects it. It is very worthwhile, and I don't want anybody to ever lose sight of the fact that how many children are growing up in this environment, and that we can all sit here and make a difference in that.
Thank you. We'll go with Kathy next. And if you have something to add on top of what
I
they
would
want to
just
say.
only want to, I can't top two of the best folks that I've ever worked with. Absolutely. The only thing that I would want to share is a little bit more about the Family Violence Council, and that the council's been around since 1993. And since the start of the council, we worked collaboratively with the city and actually have the experience in working with the city from a funding perspective. We had received funds for our Family Violence Medical Fund, and so we have been a good steward of city money in the past. We can certainly help with this process, or help, at least help to determine how it might be best to look at the distribution, the disbursement of funds, and whatever challenges we may have in terms of collecting, maintaining. You know, I think some of the issues that were brought up by the airport totally make sense. Same kinds of questions we had at the Family Violence Council meeting. So I would just assure you that the council, because of the collaborative body and all of the agencies that have been dedicated over the years, we are folks who have not moved on. We've been there all along, and I think we work very well with the city in making sure that programs are fully supported. My little 2 cents.
And I think the last speaker is Jess.
Yes, Jess.
Jess,
So-
how you doing?
Doing well. So also here with the St. Louis Family Violence Council, just a few things to add. In my position at Safe Connections, I have the pleasure of being able to see kind of both sides. So the numbers that Elena is talking about, the reactionary side of it, how many beds we need, how many cabs we need to get to a safe place, whether that's within or outside of the St. Louis area. And also, I get to see the prevention side. So how can we keep this from happening in the first place, right? And so thinking about this funding, not only how can we support survivors, but how do we prevent people from having to become survivors as well? And so a part of the Family Violence Council, we're not only reactionary agencies, we're also trying to get ahead of this problem to keep it from continuing to happen. And that's what I would hope this money would also be going to.
Okay, well, thank you. So I would say that preferably, whenever, would you want them to meet with Mary right after this, or? would you
Yes,
want-
yes,
So-
because-
So if you guys that are with us could meet with Mary, Mary, just pick, I guess, go in the back of the,
Is there any opportunity for questions?
yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes, I was just moving it right along.
Joe, Mr. Chairman, if you will, one of the, and it's up to the members of the committee, but when we originally took a look at this bill, and right now, this piece isn't in the bill, this is part of what I would like to see in the bill, but I wanted to do it after conference with the committee, is an entity like the Family Violence Council. I think that we're, indeed lucky to have them here in the city of St. Louis. They're made up of great agencies all around the city doing work each and every day, and they're doing it on a shoestring. The leadership is stable leadership, and they're not going anywhere, and they understand exactly what needs to happen within our community to begin to stabilize families. If we want to see kids perform better in school, we're going to have to stabilize the family. If we want to see crime go down, we're going to have to stabilize the family. If we want to see more young people employed opposed to just running the streets, we're going to have to stabilize that family. And all of the work of the Family Violence Council centers around that. So my push today was going to be one that would have the Family Violence Council play a much bigger role. Just like we did for a couple years on the Prop S funds, where we put the funds in one entity, and then that entity worked across the community and gathered information and distributed those funds, right, based on need. I would like to see a structure somewhat close to that, and we can formulate that amendment in under an hour and get it done to the bill. Mary and Tom, they're all prepared to look at that and get that done, and working with the Family Violence Council and other members of the committee who may like to see how that would happen. The other option is to have it be appropriated by a a committee at the Board of Aldermen on an annual basis to the Family Violence Council. So that could be like the legislation committee that we're in today, could be the committee that would handle that fund, just like public safety handles the Prop S funds. But in work in conjunction with the Family Violence Council, where the Family Violence Council would bring to the legislation committee the list of needs of I know I'm going
No,
wrong.
because
Yeah.
it's already
Okay,
convened.
all right, I'll leave it. I'll shut up. Yeah.
Questions, I'm sorry, Carol? Just 'cause
In
you're
reference
supposed
to what the president was speaking to, and I don't know who could field this question, is there a collaborative means, I guess, specifically a bank account that would
Yes.
handle these monies and be placed, and then there would be, I guess what I'm asking, is the collaborative a working organization that has a bank account, that has a way of coordinating with those people that are already set up?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And then another question that's not so logistic, it's about how do you educate people about your services? I've been in the city a long time, and I guess, I got this pamphlet now, before we get to the lieutenant here, is there anything to preempt that? And you kind of brushed to that, but.
Absolutely. So at Safe Connections and related organizations, we do a lot of community outreach and education. So specifically, we have a prevention education department that's in the majority of all of the St. Louis city and county schools,
Okay.
talking to young people. So middle schools, high schools, alternative centers, detention centers, residential facilities, pretty much anywhere you would have a young person, we try to be. And then we're also targeting adults as well, right? Because we're all eligible for experiencing domestic violence. And so
Okay, now let me ask you this, do you work on referral? In other words, does a school counselor call you, or is it that you just go in and you do sort of a workshop thing and?
Yeah, it's kind of both.
Okay.
When there's a need that presents itself in the school, oftentimes folks will reach out or work with their connections to make sure that they have an agency that can come in and respond to what's happened. But we also have marketing efforts too, so we're trying to get our programs out as opposed to just waiting for something to happen and then coming into the schools.
Good. Yeah, I've been out of the game for a while, and I fortunately have not been, had to use your services, but I think that, the education, because kids are, having things happen at a much higher rate.
We're glad you're back in the game with us.
Yeah.
Former principal
I
of
was
school.
a school administrator, and I kind of handed things off to the counselor, but I didn't know there was a whole collaborative that kind of put these services in under an umbrella organization, which I think is wonderful. So, thank you.
So, and Beth didn't have any questions, so I'd like to make a motion, we pass Board Bill number 99 out with a due pass recommendation.
So moved.
Previous role?
And previous roll, no objection, no second.
You second.
You were second. I made the motion, you
Oh,
were
I
second.
second.
She was
Previous
previous roll, and there's no objection to previous
I
roll.
said so moved.
And, oh, I'm sorry. And then I would just say, because you're supposed to be over there.
I
at
gotta
10:30.
run back up.
Mary, if you could validate and meet with everybody, pick any of the rooms that are open in town, so that you guys can work out, so we're moving forward instead of.
We really appreciate the opportunity to come
Thank
here.
And they'll validate the parking. But go with those guys, so, because they're gonna help
Thank you.
formulate the rest of the stuff.
Thanks, everybody. You have an open invitation to come to our meetings.
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Thank
I was
you.
just gonna say, where do they put them? Somewhere else. Oh, I see.
Yeah, we're gonna,
Put them by the ladies' room.
Yeah. Put them by the bar.
Now, wait a minute, we want to get those men involved.
Put 'em
Well, I know,
Put 'em by the
put them by
bar.
the
Put 'em by the
restroom. The bar, the bar, that loosens everybody's pocket.
Rick and Linda, if you guys wanna just go up there, Carol, you can stay where you're at.
Thank you.
We're gonna pass this thing
For
through
allowing me
here.
to stay where I am.
We're gonna pass this through in like a few minutes.
Okay.
I like the thing, loose change, that's
There
not.
was,
I've got all this.
Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
no, I'm just saying that there was questions last week, but the people that had the questions couldn't make it
Aren't here.
today,
Oh,
so,
Lordy.
so, but I appreciate you coming down, so.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and I had, go ahead.
So we're gonna put board bill, 168 in front of us,
Okay.
and we don't even need a motion for that. I believe.
Okay. I just,
Because there's no committee subs or anything.
well, here's the thing. May I?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. One of our board members, or one of our committee members was unable to make it, and she was one that was rather vocal last week in making these amendments. Now, she's come up with a few more. And I kind of feel as though it's a matter of semantics, and I don't feel as though I need to make all of them. I guess we could put them out there. Here's the text that I got from Alderwoman Navarro. She's going to be out of town. Based on the last meeting, she wants to change good faith in section 3D and E to reasonable belief. I don't know if,
I don't know what that is, but
well, it's,
okay with me.
both of them are lawyer talk,
that's what I
so,
mean, it's lawyer talk. It's
and I don't,
I could care less.
I don't think it really
I mean,
matters.
it's up to you guys. You wanted to say.
Okay.
No, it's fine.
Well, you know,
Or do we want to let them talk and then
Yeah,
I'll
but
talk
here's-
about these?
here's what I'm thinking, because that broke up over there, Jeffrey's here, but I still want to do previous role,
Okay.
which would eliminate Jeffrey. I think we do like we've been doing, like we did earlier. Let's pass this out and then do a floor substitute, because.
I don't want to do a floor substitute. I want it out with any
That's gonna
committee
change-
substitutes we're making
So,
today.
Hey, Tom, then I'm gonna need Lewis back in here.
Why?
Well, because we don't have enough to, we don't have a quorum anymore. Like,
Why not?
Well, we can, I guess, do previous role on the.
Yeah.
You know?
Because I know we lost that quorum. So-
Yeah, we'll be fine.
Okay, so then you wanna make a motion to put whatever the amendment, you got it in front of us?
I would just like the, okay.
That's what I'm saying, you got the amendments printed out?
We can get these printed if we could get somebody to, okay. Let's, while she's doing this, let's let the director of personnel talk about how this came to be.
Yeah, just a little bit of
Background.
information for the honorable alderman. The whistleblower bill was introduced and then in January, it was supposed to be changed, amended. The mayor's office and the city councilor's office didn't have an opportunity to see it before it was presented. I received a phone call, testified on it. Part of the issue is that we have already in place a number of different entities that protect employees' rights and also advise them of that. And I've prepared packets for everyone here. But the gist of what part of our concern was is that the board bill that passed into law names CREA as being the entity that's responsible for investigating Title VII claims,
These all the same?
issues of discrimination, issues of harassment, et cetera, when in fact CREA does not have that authority under its own ordinance or any statutory authority. And as an example of that, we've only received one letter, but there's a letter here dated July 24th from the director of CREA to myself, and it says in part, CREA, and it's addressed to me, it says CREA does not have jurisdiction to investigate claims of discrimination in other city departments. CREA does have a duty to take said claims and pass them along to the appropriate city department. We're thus fulfilling this role in this case, and that was addressed to me. We subsequently investigated this complaint and then made a determination. And of course, if the person doesn't like our determination, they then have the opportunity to go either to the Missouri Commission on Human Rights or the EEOC. So in each of our city departments, we have diversity counselors who receive and respond to complaints. We also have the ability, and I'm excited about this, the police department now for the first time is using us to respond to these internal EEO complaints. We have an employee relations section which works in concert with the city councilor's office to investigate any kind of complaints about retaliation, about sexual harassment, any kind of inappropriate treatment. One of the things I've also included in the packet are the different postings that we have throughout the city. And for instance, you'll see examples of like where we have postings in our buildings and also on our websites advising people that discrimination is prohibited by MCHR. Retaliation is prohibited. In terms of the comptroller's office, we have posters that talk about the fraud hotline. We've got, of course, administrative regulations with the Department of Personnel given to committee members. 103 and 113, there's a formal equal employment opportunity policy and complaint procedure and policy and complaint procedure against harassment. These are all presented to employees at the time we do new employee orientation. So we have all this. We have people who receive the employee code of conduct that talks about their protections and their various responsibilities. They have to sign that on an annual basis. And then we also have the charter, which if anybody has any problem with any of my decisions as Director of Personnel, they have a recourse. They can appeal it to the Civil Service Commission as ultimate authority. So there's a number of protections in place. I would say that this city, the gentleman before was not quite correct. When he said that there is no whistleblower law, there is, and Nancy Kissler, Deputy City Councilor, is here, but a whistleblower is in fact a recognized exception to the Missouri at-will employment doctrine. So if you have if you're going to whistleblow and make a complaint because there's a public policy concern, that is a recognized protected exception to at-will employment. Now, we're not at-will anyway. We're protected as civil service employees. But there's even been, for the committee's consideration, an amendment just recently, now it needs to be changed, to the Missouri Human Rights Commission and their actual statute. Or it's not a statute, I guess. Well, actually, Nancy, is this a statute?
Do we have that?
Yes.
In front of us there?
Which includes whistleblowing now. Now, they made a mistake and they were on TV because they excluded local governments and political subdivisions, and they're getting to work to correct this. But you'll see that, we blast people with these postings in our training. We do training periodically, several times a year, on sexual harassment. We take it out to the departments. We ensure that people are aware of all these protections in place. And then again, the only other issue I would say is that, if there's an elected official that somebody has a complaint with, I don't have any authority to investigate you, but you go to the Missouri Ethics Commission. That's where that properly is disposed of. So, and we also have information here on the Civilian Oversight Board. It's included now in the civil service rules that the role of the Civilian Oversight Board, if anybody has a complaint about the police department, they can file it with the Director of Public Safety, or they can file it directly with the Civilian Oversight Board. So that's included in both the civil service rules and in the separate Civilian Oversight ordinance that the board passed. So that's just in short sort of how we believe that the employees are covered in numerous different ways. And we had just made some suggested, and Alderman Howard brought this to us, some suggested corrections because as written, there were some entities that we thought were misplaced. It was supposed to be changed. The mayor's office had said that they would commit to changing this and going to the board, and at that point in time, Francis decided not to run again, and I have some correspondence where it just kind of got dropped through the cracks. So Alderman Howard, has revisited this to follow through on what was supposed to have taken place, I guess, in April. So this is a lot of information, I know, but I just wanted to show that there's all sorts of documentations and ways that we are very aggressive about pursuing our employees' rights.
So, just only because in all the paper last.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just got that too.
No, thank you. You had said that you got a letter from Charles Bryce.
Yeah, it's in
Yes,
here.
it's in
It's
here.
in your packet.
And what did it say? I didn't come up.
Yeah, let me get that
How many
again.
asked for you?
It's
There were two
redacted,
across
but
the place that just-
I redacted the individual.
Yes.
Okay, I saw that.
with the black marks on,
Yeah.
there you go,
This
that's
is the
it.
only complaint that was directed to CREA, and basically he says, The Civil Rights Enforcement Agency was contacted by this individual concerning a claim of discrimination, and that his civil rights were violated. But the most important part is this third paragraph. He himself says CREA does not have jurisdiction to investigate claims of discrimination in other city departments, but they do have a duty to forward them to me, or the appropriate entity. So they forwarded this to me because I have the authority under the charter and the responsibility to investigate. And again, if somebody has a problem with my decision, they appeal it to the Civil Service Commission, or the alderman haul me over here to explain what I've done. So there's two different ways you can get at me,
No, that's
so.
fine, because the only one complaint I had heard was that somehow we were taking CREA out and,
And CREA is designed to respond to like non-employment, I mean, if there's if there's issues about housing or even employment that is not within the city
Private.
system, you know.
Private employment.
Private
This explains from the head of CREA, we're good on that. I just,
So, yeah.
I mean, that letter
I-
explains it, and that.
And that was
takes it out of it.
some people were concerned about taking CREA out, some people were concerned about removing the whistleblower law. My feeling is, and I think I agree with the Director of Personnel, but, you know, if we need a whistleblower law, I think embedded in here and in the employee orientation, it's all covered. But rather than repealing the whole law, if we can make those changes and tweaks to make it relevant, the previous law also mentioned, what was the position that they were to take it to?
There was some
There was a
position.
Missouri Ethics Office.
Yeah,
or
and
a
there
city-
isn't any.
City Ethics
City
Office, and we don't
Ethics
have one.
Commissioner, which
We don't
there,
have-
And there isn't one.
there was never one, and I don't know if they made provision to hire one, but it was never budgeted in the bill, it was very nebulous. So, I would ask that the committee, I guess, if we could make, I have before you, I've also, the suggestions from,
Yeah, I saw that.
Alderwoman Navarro, some refinement, but Chairman, would you maybe go around the table and see if there are questions of,
I'm open to that. If anyone, we can just do this more, it's not that many of us here, we'll just do it more roundtable. If you
Okay.
got something to speak out.
I might want to offer one thing if I
Yeah.
can too.
Sure.
I'd like to take responsibility if this is changed for disseminating this. We could then educate employees on the new employee orientation. The ordinance talks about disseminating this information. We could then do that like we do the code of conduct. We would do it as new hire, and then we would do it on an annual basis. We would give the employees a copy of the whistleblower ordinance at the time of their service rating, so that all the civil service employees would get it on an annual basis. And we could assume that responsibility.
I said, I'm not a lawyer, but I said, what would the difference between good faith and reasonable belief be? That's important to be changed. I said, I'm not a lawyer, but the bill says good faith, and she would like it to be changed to reasonable belief.
These
And I
guys can
don't,
just join us at the table.
I don't know, yeah, sit, yeah.
Tanner, come on up.
I don't
We just-
understand.
Go ahead, Lou, why don't you join us? We'll just do it more roundtable.
Is it, I mean, if it's that important,
Do they-
then we ought to do it.
do they have
but
copies of these?
This is
Do we
the,
have any more copies?
Yeah,
yeah,
So
That's
they
their
can have
copies,
this
yeah.
in front of them?
these are the ones that I think,
there's a bunch here.
because then she has another question here about the amount of days that you have to file. But first, you guys know the difference between good faith and reasonable belief.
Would you like me to comment on that?
Please.
Okay. Reasonable belief means that a reasonable person in a similar situation would have reason to believe that they have a complaint. All right? Good faith means it's a higher standard. Would you agree that it's you have to have a good faith belief? It's not just a reasonable belief, but it has to be, it's a higher standard that you're not looking at it from some perspective that's biased, that you're looking at it from an honest, good faith perspective, that you believe that you have a complaint.
I actually like reasonable belief, because a lot of times in common law, it's like, what would a prudent man do? You know,
Correct.
what's reasonable? So I think that's probably a good suggestion, reasonable belief, as to, I think it's more specific and more refined.
And you articulated the standard there better, so it's a reasonably prudent person, a reasonably prudent man in a similar situation would have reason to believe.
So,
That seems,
Where good faith is actually more of a contractual term, that you will act in good faith to fulfill your contractual obligations.
so that would be section 3D and E.
I like it.
Okay. So it would be reasonable belief.
that sounds fine.
Do we have to vote on each amendment? Or can we
Or
make them
suggestion,
all?
these are like suggestions.
Yeah.
Right.
So do we have to?
They're not amendments.
Well, these-
Can we just put them in there
And then vote
and
on
then
them all?
vote,
And then
as long as
vote.
everybody agrees we don't have it in front of us?
No,
Jeffrey, good morning.
In order to make it clean,
Right.
we should probably do an amendment that says this page after
And this line.
this line would take all
Okay.
confusion out.
But the question would be, can we just correct ours as we go, or do we need each amendment one by one?
Can we put that on as a
words,
committee
we're gonna keep
substitute
doing-
and
No,
then present it
you're
on
gonna
the
have to
floor
have
with those?
one. You're gonna have to have at least one for the record, for the clerk,
Okay.
so that if anybody goes back, there's a
Okay,
record
so-
of how that amendment
so-
was read.
So,
But everyone, and unless a member says, I want my own copy, you know, you have to provide
Okay,
copies.
so we can do this and then we can mark this up and then we can make copies for everybody. Is that sufficient?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that sufficient?
I do have some concern that just adding these amendments
Yeah.
without taking a very close look at how they work with the rest of the bill.
I'm not saying all of them.
Okay,
Okay,
so,
can we change that to reasonable belief? and
Right.
As changing good faith to reasonable belief in
that's
three
easy.
Next ones
D and
don't
E?
seem so
What
easy.
line and page?
Okay. It would be page 5 of 7, line 1
Okay.
and line 10,
And you were changing that to,
from good faith to
To
reasonable
reasonable,
belief.
that's where that shows up. Okay. But so now my point with the next one,
Wait a
then it
minute,
says.
let me. Line 1 and 10, okay.
It says change the definition, we would like to change the definition of retaliation to say, well, we have to find out exactly what line that's on. Okay. And I didn't get the nuance of the difference between the old retaliation and the new retaliation. Any adverse change?
If you look at line 6, retaliation means any adverse change in employee status in the terms and conditions of employment in which employee's protected activity under his ordinance is a contributing factor.
Alderwoman, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is there a sense of urgency on passing this?
No, I just, I would like to get it done for that because it's hard to get and we've got the director of personnel here.
Well, he doesn't mind coming back. I was just thinking a committee substitute would be so much cleaner than keep going through all these.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is since we have the committee here, let's get them.
Yeah, what are these changes, right?
Let's talk about the changes now,
Okay.
since we have people here and have, a quorum to agree upon them or not. No?
Is your intentions to vote out the bill out of committee today?
With the changes?
With the changes?
Yeah.
I don't know that we're gonna make all the changes.
I think what Jeffrey's saying is, maybe we make the changes and then bring it back to the committee sub. Is that what you're saying?
And I'm asking, is that what
The
we're
changes
doing?
offline,
Yeah, I'm just thinking, if we had a committee sub, it would make it.
a
so
lot
much
easier and
easier.
cleaner.
Cleaner.
You know, I understand what you're
Okay.
saying, talking through it, this relates to this and this relates to that, but.
Okay.
So, it's your bill, so I'm with whatever you want. Mine doesn't.
I'm in no hurry.
So, but why don't we still in an open meeting, go ahead and.
Go through these,
We can make them without even having to vote on, because you're gonna just, then we'll put it together and bring it back to the
Substitute.
committee sub.
okay.
There are
We won't
some
vote
here
it
that
out
I
too.
think are terribly, at the end, terribly problematic from a legal perspective.
Right.
Okay,
I
well,
don't think we need to do all of them, and that's
Well,
why I
then
was
somebody
like,
that knows ought to start that then.
and that's
You know
why
the
I'm kinda like,
problem, we
okay,
shouldn't
I can do
entertain
good faith, but now that we
Oh, no,
change
shouldn't.
definitions of retaliation, I have some questions about those.
Right, so I got a question. then should we adjourn since we're really just kind of working on a committee sub and there's really no quorum? Should we just adjourn and keep working? Or does this have to be while we're working since this committee still has to be taped? Because at this point, we're still being taped.
You mean that to go through are you asking if you should adjourn?
Right, well, just because now all we're doing is discussing this, we're not gonna vote on it. We're
No,
just
if you're going to continue discussions, you cannot adjourn, you need to keep it
Keep
on
going.
tape.
Okay.
Because that
Okay,
would
I
be a
was
violation
just-
of the open meetings
Yeah,
law.
if it's germane to.
That's fine,
what we're
I'm just
talking
curious
about.
on it. Thank you.
So then my next question is on retaliation, are her changes reasonable? Someone said we didn't think they were.
I actually think her language again is probably improved.
Okay.
It's more consistent with what you would read in terms of retaliation.
Okay.
I don't think that you need, from my perspective, all the frequent staff changes, frequent undesirable office changes. You're getting into some pretty petty stuff
Okay.
that would be more appropriate for a grievance as compared to saying that it's actually risen to the level of, whistleblower retaliation. So I actually prefer, as an HR person, the alderman.
Her definition
Yes.
okay, so then
I
that.
mean, it looks to me like it's an attempt to utilize the old language of the Missouri Human Rights Act. And if that's what you all want to do, that's fine, but that's what it does. So it's not
So is
consistent with the current law,
The current law is what now?
is motivating factor. And it has a very different meaning, and I know there was a lot of disagreement over that and everything. I mean, you can do that, but I'm just letting you know that it's not consistent with the current. It would not be consistent with either the current federal or state law, but it doesn't have to be.
Well, I guess my question is the current federal or state law more rigid
No.
or less rigid?
No, it's less rigid.
It's
It would be
less.
less rigid.
Because it's motivating factor. If I didn't mean to discriminate, Carol, it doesn't count.
Oh, no, that's not the difference.
Kinda.
No, it
Well,
has
I
nothing to
mean-
do with intent. That's not
Oh,
the
okay, I
difference.
thought it was my motivation.
Explain, please.
No,
Yeah.
motivating factor means that it has to be the primary motivating
that's right.
factor.
As compared to what it
Okay.
used to be was contributing factor.
In
Contributing.
state law, which means that if it was on somebody's mind, the motivating factor is a but for, okay? Let's say that, you're terminated and you say it was because of your gender, okay? If your gender motivated somebody and but for your gender, you would not have been terminated, that's what you need to show. And a contributing factor, you don't need to show but for. Okay, there might be other reasons that you were terminated or
So
that you
this
weren't
is a
promoted.
little looser,
Correct.
okay,
Correct.
and allows a little more opportunity for someone to bring a
Correct.
case forward.
But the other things, what the old ordinance said here, the current one, I should say, when adverse changes included or not limited to, I've got all sorts of problems with, some of these things. I mean, when they're talking about unsubstantiated letters of reprimand or unsatisfactory performance evaluations or whatever, those are all things that are appealed to our Civil Service Commission. The commission has exclusive authority, as a quasi judicial agency to.
So that should be
determine.
struck?
I think all those examples should be struck.
So
Well-
in other words, it should be a
I mean-
contributing
But
factor.
then you
after
have
the
the
change.
problem of
Adverse
what do you
change.
mean by an adverse change in an employee? That's the part of this that you're taking issue with, Rick, which is fine, but that's a different thing. So we've got the standard contributing factor, but then the issue you bring up is
the second
that
part
you
of it.
want to exclude those items really from the definition of an adverse change, because they are adverse changes. Okay, they are adverse changes to the reasonable person would think, yeah, if I get an unfavorable rating, that's an adverse, change in the terms and
But I
conditions
think
of
it's
my
leading
employment.
employees to say that they're being retaliated against, when in fact it may be just a difference of opinion about somebody's performance. And the appropriate route is to have it reviewed by the Department of Personnel and then to the Civil Service Commission.
Yeah, and that may be fine. I
So,
mean, I'm not.
I agree with you in terms of
Right.
having probably going with the current Missouri human rights definition
I know. Hey,
of
Rick.
what retaliation
I'm
is.
sorry, since I'm a little lost on what page.
We're on page 3, section D, line 6.
But I think the issue you might have, Rick, is that you're gonna have to exclude those things or somewhere, and I think there is an attempt to exclude them somewhere, but it ended up being confusing, and I don't know if that's still in here. Because in the original one as it now exists, in one place it says this doesn't pertain to personnel
Close to
actions.
the end, I think, Nancy.
Right. Oh, no, it was one.
Second page.
In the
Wait a
definition
minute,
of the
let's,
proper
hold
government
on, before we
action.
move on to something
Okay.
else, let's decide. I would just like to know, are we going to strike,
Do you want contributing or motivating factor?
is a contributing factor in adverse
Or
change in
motivating
employment
factor is,
our motivating factor?
motivating factor is a determinative, has had a determinative influence on the adverse decision. That's a higher standard.
But wouldn't they just appeal anyway? If we say one thing and the state law says the other,
Right.
aren't they just gonna say, well, then I'm gonna move on to the next level of?
Sure. They do.
Okay.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right.
So,
Yeah, but the employee wouldn't move on to a more restrictive standard.
Well, they may not know that. I mean, they may know it.
That's the other, yeah, I mean, a lot of people not to
they're-
look at it wouldn't know the difference.
A lot of people don't even know that the
It's
MCHR's changed, so, I think the simpler, I think it can mislead employees if you get too specific. I mean, we get grievances about people because their supervisor doesn't let them paint their office pink. I mean, we get things like that.
Sure.
And this is really important stuff. So I think that, sometimes if you start including all these different things, it almost makes it look like this is an exhaustive list, and
so,
But we want to deal with the standard for, I mean, I see it as two different issues.
Right, I do too.
One is the standard and then the other one
there's
is,
examples.
right, exactly,
So, Mr. Franks, you're saying we don't need examples?
I don't think so. I think the
I
employee
don't
will
think
come
so
to you
either.
and say, this is
Here's
what's
what's
happening
going
to
on.
me.
Going on.
Why bait?
Employees always do
List
that.
all the examples.
Yeah.
Okay, so can we decide whether we want to strike these? Or
I mean,
it's my
it's your-
decision
it's your bill.
strike
You
them?
know, Whatever you
Okay.
do, because
Okay.
you're actually gonna do the committee sub, so there's really nothing I'm doing, I'm just
There's a
listening.
factor.
So are you striking from here?
We're going to strike line, wait a minute now,
Okay.
I will,
from line 6
Following the word ordinance.
to the end. Okay.
I can even officially,
And then we will put in is an adverse, is a, under the, is a contributing factor.
You want contributing or motivating? I think motivating makes it more consistent with state law,
State
which
law.
is good.
That would be up there.
Yeah, I know. I'm just putting it here. Is a,
Motivating factor. And then we're
Motivating.
consistent with our buddies.
Yeah. that,
we're
Anyway,
most
factor.
curious,
okay.
for her to, for us to hear to say Friday morning, and if she introduces her committee sub, can we put it on for a meeting for Friday, or is that?
Who are we
under our
talking
rules?
to?
I just get your
I
question.
thought he was talking to the chair.
He's
No.
talking to the
No,
law.
I'm just
Eyes
saying,
are blurry.
if she puts her committee subs together today, can we have a meeting Friday morning? You don't like those?
Well, it's not up to me, it's certainly your prerogative when you want to call the meeting, but the
Well, it-
president doesn't like them.
We would have to, when would she have to have her committee sub together?
To get on the
For this
agenda for
Friday.
Friday, you could do the committee subs, you could certainly do it at that time on Friday.
I just, just so you know, Carol, if you wanna hold a meeting.
Let's get this done and then we'll talk about the
and then we
meeting.
can call
Let's not
meeting
get
for
ahead of
Friday
ourselves here.
morning.
Okay. All right, so we will change that and we'll strike line 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay.
And then what was the next? I
The
was just reading her
reporting
thing.
time, I don't
The
know
days, it says here,
the number of days.
that I.
What is she talking about with 5? I don't know what the alderman means by state law is 5 years. What is,
Well, she's saying,
that's a statute of limitations for a civil matter, but that
But
doesn't have
it's
any.
I mean, actually, the statute of limitations is 2 years, but you have 180 days to file.
but I don't
Right.
know, reporting procedures and timelines, okay, auditing officials, reasonable
It would
belief.
seem to me that they should be consistent also
You
with
see it, Nan?
Here it is.
whatever.
Maybe.
Section 6,
Well, that's contrary to your regs.
Procedure, an employee who believes she has been retaliated against
There it is.
60 days.
So you're
In
gonna have a
violations.
problem with your regs.
Yeah.
And this is consistent with our employment regs? No?
Inconsistent.
Okay, so what are our employment regs?
Your regs are there. No, you have copies of them.
Do you, have you all?
No, I've got it in the packet.
It's in there. It's normally, our regs are here.
I'm sorry.
That's okay, don't
That's
worry.
fine,
I just wanna get it right.
No, I was saying she was. Because either you're the clerk, or you're the clerk.
10
Right,
days.
nothing matters.
That's what I thought, it's the same as the commission, isn't it?
Yeah.
10 days. Most of our appeals are 10 days.
Okay, an employee who believes he or she has been retaliated against in violation, retaliated against? Or is this the original reporting?
It says reporting retaliation.
He's saying.
So I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing, right. I believe.
Is there a time limit for the other?
For reporting any?
Yeah.
Most of our time limits are 10 days because of the Civil Service Commission. We just try to keep them as consistent as we possibly can.
This is not.
It's too confusing.
Okay, so line 11 should be 10 rather than 60?
If you need some.
I will.
I'm not going to
No, if we do.
Page,
10 days, you're saying?
It's the same as where our civil service
Yeah,
commission is.
same as our commission.
Well, she's got this 180 days.
just leave it.
60 days, 90.
Well, 180 days is,
Yeah, that's a
Is
state.
she saying she wants that in
that's
here?
a state.
No,
That's, 180 days is a state.
we're gonna do
She just
10
said
to
she
be
wants
consistent.
longer than 60 days.
Yeah, because she mentions 90 days. That's what I'm saying, are we to put hers in?
No,
your bill?
we're gonna
Okay.
do 10 days
We're gonna
because that's
leave the rest
consistent
of
with
that
our
alone.
employment, yes. Okay. And then the reporting, if they report the auditing official, and did you mean by the auditing official, the people that are identified at the beginning?
I'm sorry.
While reporting.
Where were you, ma'am?
I'm on page 6, line 12,
Mm-hmm. This is it.
and
6 line 12.
it says, the complaint must be filed with the auditing official investigating the underlying proper government action. Now, does that, I guess the auditing official is the collective term for,
The auditing, that's a defined term, and that's defined
Okay.
earlier in the bill, so.
shall meet to establish,
So
wait a minute, no, that's not,
if you go to page 2, beginning at line 1, that's the
Okay.
definition of auditing official.
the department personnel. Okay, then we've got that covered, okay.
I think there was a question that the alderman had about if it were filed with the incorrect person, then there needs to be the responsibility to forward it to the correct person.
Uh-huh.
I mean, just as Charles did, with CREA, he forwarded it to me. If I got something that was a issue of, which I did with, some audit exceptions, I sent them to the comptroller to investigate,
Overtime for the police.
Okay, so do we say if it is not, how can we clean that up on section 6? To make sure that we are saying that,
Then we can check it for future. Because they may use it for questions.
we're okay.
All right, no,
I mean, we got 2 attorneys here. If you want to stay, you can stay, but I'm marking this up so that we can,
I'd like to stay so I know.
So we know what we're doing, yeah.
That's where we're at.
Yeah, I was just looking to see if anywhere else in the body, and it doesn't, states
No,
that,
it doesn't.
so do we need to put that if any audit official receiving a complaint will refer it to the appropriate audit
Yeah,
official?
that's what I would put.
Okay, just a tag there.
Yeah, I would just add it on to the end of it.
So in other words, if you get
If
something,
I get
I mean, common
something-
sense would tell you that, but I guess if we
Well, that's
need
what
to.
CREA already did, they sent it right to us.
Right, but you know,
We've already got this in C,
In
on page
section-
4, section C, on page 4, a department personnel official, I mean, we maybe need to broaden that, may transfer a report of improper government action to another auditing official for investigation if the department personnel official deems it appropriate. Maybe we need to broaden
Well, it
that.
says
Well, here,
may,
look at-
maybe
look
we
at-
should
look.
say shall.
Shall.
Look at B. Auditing officials shall meet to establish processes and procedures for managing complaints filed pursuant to this ordinance, and auditing officials shall investigate and dispose of reports of improper governmental action in accordance with these processes. An auditing official concludes that improper action has been taken, or concludes that the relevant department, agency, or supervisory officials have hindered the auditing official's investigation into the complaint. The auditing official shall notify in writing the city councilor. So this kind of defines that you all need to talk to one another at some point.
Right, and that's the main thing.
And that's the main thing. So
Right,
I don't think we need, I think it's
Right.
sufficient.
I think we're okay.
Yeah,
I think
as long
we're
as
fine.
it says shall and not may, because may implies that you really don't have to do it.
And you can if
Yeah.
you
I
want to.
may not want to do that.
You can if you want to.
I think that's a good point.
So may rather
Um,
than, I mean, shall rather than may.
And then the last thing, number 2, under the retaliate, I don't think we need to give examples of retaliation.
Verbal abuse, intimidation.
Do
We've
we?
got all that in our
We've got that in
regulations
our
already.
reg.
They're already in
All,
there.
all
Okay.
sorts of definitions.
And then I'm a little, the number
That-
3,
number
remedy
3
is
we're looking
really a
at
hot
hers.
button to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me
I
too.
can't do that.
Retaliation.
I wouldn't
Right.
do
I'm
that.
not putting that in.
I would not put that,
Remedies include.
I would not put that in there.
Yeah, even the Civil Service Commission can't grant the kind of remedies they're
There's no
talking about.
authority, and what you're doing is
Okay.
creating a state cause of action. You
No,
Okay,
no.
and reasonable terms, okay.
So,
Well, Alderman Navarro made some good suggestions there.
right. I just don't think we want to open the can of worms if we're going to try to
Really
resolve this in-house and have mediation.
Right.
Why do we want to
Yep.
say we're going to give people money?
And I'm meeting with the mediator Thursday.
Good, good. Okay.
I stole your
I
pen.
think this is.
No, that wasn't mine,
Oh.
or it might have just been here.
So are we,
Clean it up.
do we have any other concerns?
Well, if you want me to go through it, I can do that.
Well, let's all take a stab at it.
Let's look at it, okay.
And you're with who now? The city?
City council, I'm the
City
deputy city
councilor's office?
councilor.
Okay.
Nancy Kessler.
Okay, Nancy, I'm sorry.
Okay. I think there's some confusion in the definition of improper government action where it says,
Where are we?
Where are you, what page?
okay, let's see, I was looking at the original one, so I'm gonna have to find it.
Page
Some of
two,
these are
line
word-
7.
Yep.
On the bill,
No.
okay.
Or line
Page
11.
Line
2,
11.
starting at line 11, it excludes.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. It excludes city personnel actions, so it says it's not including but not limited to employee grievances. I don't really know what that means. Complaints, appointments, promotions, transfers, assignments, reassignments. So it seems like it excludes from this definition of improper government action just about anything that an employee would be complaining about. Am I correct?
Wait a
in
minute
that?
now. It says, the action need not be within the scope of the employee's elected officials, board members, commission members, or committee members' official duties
Okay, yeah.
to be subject to a claim of improper
And
governmental action.
then the next line,
Improper governmental action
Does
does not
not.
include
Not
city
include.
personnel actions, including but not limited to employee grievances, complaints, appointments, promotions, transfers.
Well, again, because those are all under the exclusive jurisdiction of the Civil Service Commission.
right,
So
so,
does
so
this
what
need to be
include,
struck?
so what's include, I'm just wondering, what is your intent to include that an employee could complain about that the Department of Personnel would investigate under this?
Political pressure.
Excuse me?
Political pressure.
Just political pressure.
Could be political pressure, it could be abuse from a county office, we've run into that. It could be from an outside vendor, it could be,
Okay.
Bullying, which we really have never addressed.
Okay.
So
Could
there
be
are
what? Bullying?
bullying in the workplace, so it may not be a formal action. And the thing is that this gives more teeth. Our grievance process is limited, except for our unions, because I make the final recommendation, but then the appointing authority can say yes or no.
No.
This gives a lot more weight, you know.
To
that
the
yes.
complaint.
So I
Yes.
was looking, okay, so where is the provision on the remedies? Oh, that's section 5 now, okay.
Section 5.
Okay. So my question is, if you're not talking about
It begins on page 6.
personnel action terminating number one, I'm not sure what restitution would mean in this context. But why would you be reinstating somebody if they hadn't been terminated, or reimbursing them for lost wages or expenses? Why would they be getting lost wages or reinstatement if we're not talking about a termination or a suspension or?
Well, because
Yeah.
constructive discharge isn't even recognized, you know, for us, and that happens. I get those exit interviews where someone says that they've been, their work environment has become so intolerable that they've quit. And then they give us an exit interview and they claim constructive discharge, which isn't recognized except under Title VII.
Okay.
So-
Can you explain that?
Basically, since we are a city, a political subdivision, constructive discharge means that I haven't fired you, but I've been so nasty to you
That forced me out.
And we're immune from that, just like we're immune from OSHA, we're immune from constructive discharge unless we're claiming that it was done based on race or
color,
sex.
yeah, right,
Exactly.
yeah.
So if you're a white male or a white female under 40 or whatever, you know, you're out of luck. But this allows for those people who were bullied or subjected to, you know, a hostile work environment, et cetera, to have a redress.
Okay. And it also addresses sexual harassment discrimination. So I just want to make sure, I don't know what anybody's intending. When I read it, it looked to me like they're intending to allow an employee to file an action under here if they've been discriminated against or didn't get a promotion because of their gender, race, what have you. That's what it looks like the intent is, and maybe I'm wrong, but just so that it doesn't do that. Am I
The
wrong?
question
That's not covered under here.
And one of the questions I have is that, you know, if this is an ordinance duly passed by the board, this applies to all city employees. I mean, all city employees, not just civil
just
service,
civil
but the accepted positions.
Mhm.
You know, I have no governance over any of the mayor's appointees or perhaps the top level people from the comptroller or county offices. This is an ordinance. So this then gives
Applies to-
our other 700 employees out there, you know, protection.
Okay, all right, I was just confused when I was reading that.
I understand it. There are a lot of parallels, but it kind of amplifies what we already do within the civil service and gives another avenue for people, you know, to go
Yeah.
if.
But, I mean, it does
Well.
say, so it does say that it excludes personnel actions, including appointments, promotions, transfers, even if, you know, I assume that would.
That would
Are
only
we
be
still
for
on
civil
section
service.
5?
Yeah, I'm looking at, well, I think it's section 1, it's the definitions. I'm flipping back and forth because I just recently
You know,
saw this.
I wanna-
So I'm looking at C, section
So-
2C.
I'm talking to Lou, and I think what we'll do, since we're not gonna have a quorum return, and since we're not taking a vote, and we're just working on this, rather than have all this just keep going on and on, I think we'll go ahead and make a motion to adjourn, and then,
Okay, let's just, rather than abruptly adjourn, since let's
okay.
come to a conclusion here.
I'm
rather
fine
than-
with that.
And I'll take the amendment and go back, and now that I've got the
That's fine. I'm
proposed
fine either
amendment,
way.
I can
Let's
look at
make
that.
with that. That's fine.
So, you're pointing out again?
Oh, I said I'll have time to look at the amendment,
Okay,
because this is the first time I'm seeing this, that's why it's hard for me, I'm flipping
Okay.
back and forth between.
all right,
the
so
ordinance.
would you entertain that if we make the amendments and we let you take another look at it, you
Oh,
could
yeah, absolutely.
make any salient revisions or suggestions?
Suggestion, yeah.
Okay.
You know, there was some discussion about whether it were necessary. I mean, I'll just be very honest, you know, because, again, and that's why I brought this entire packet. One thing is, you just rescind it because
Right.
it appears duplicative with things that we already do. But again, the civil service, we've got about 7,300 full-time, or 6,800 full-time employees, 500 to 900 part-time, but that doesn't include the county offices, that doesn't include, the accepted
Part-time
positions.
people that are, yeah.
So I think this is
Maybe
a
on,
broader
yeah.
thing than just civil service, and that's why.
This would
Yes.
include them under
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
But
It
then
would.
I guess the problem is the auditing officials only include the comptroller, the department personnel, and the civilian oversight board. So, I mean, if it's a complaint involving a county office,
They would give it to the right
They
person.
would go to the right person.
But I don't know would any of those
Yeah, no.
bodies have authority over the sheriff's
that's
department.
what
I
I'm
don't think
trying to
so.
say, is
I don't
they
think so.
would. So that's why even it might include it, none of those entities could do anything.
We get this all the time, unless somebody files a complaint. I've gotten 2 complaints in the last 3 months from sheriff's employees.
Yes.
And I have to tell them, I have no jurisdiction. Now, I do we did
We did, yeah.
we did investigations at the request of the judges. And
Voluntarily, yeah.
at a moment in time.
Yeah,
We
and the
did it for
prior
Murphy,
sheriff.
too.
But now it's
Allowed that.
happening again, and I have no jurisdiction over those
But we do
people.
forward them
Right.
to the
So
sheriff.
So I don't
send
know
them
what
to-
your, yeah,
The
I don't know
sheriff.
how you're gonna have any
Even
authority
with this
over a
ordinance,
county
I don't think
Overs-
that would change it.
Okay,
So it
Well, it
may.
may not change it, but if it gets too bad in the sheriff's office in the future, and I hate it that I'm on film, the board
Let's-
can
yeah, I
always
was
call
gonna-
them over here.
okay. Can we,
I mean, they've done that to other departments, because I've
Right,
been over here and
right.
testified before other
So,
departments,
yeah,
before the
Lucy, so we
committee.
can
I
adjourn
think,
since
I
we're-
think we've
Yeah.
kind of come to the conclusion that we've made our amendments. Is that,
Well, you're
and
gonna make
then
them, you're
Well, I
gonna make
mean,
them
we're-
later. You're gonna-
we've-
right,
Yeah.
you're-
discussed our amendments, and then we're gonna make them, and then we can come back and reconvene if we need to, or we can just go over them.
Right, so the
You wanna-
motion out there is to adjourn. Is there a second on the
Second.
motion? Okay, then we're adjourned.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.